Welcome to the IIA's 2014 Gaming Conference Speaker Preview. My name is Shannon Steffi. Today I'm talking to Craig Greene, who will be one of our industry experts at the 2014 Gaming Conference taking place in Las Vegas, Nevada on April 14th through the 16th, 2014 at the Mirage Hotel and Casino. Craig will present a session called Fraud Primer, Getting the New Auditor Ready for the Occupational Fraudster on Monday, April 14th at 3:55 p.m. Craig is a consultant and expert witness with McGovern and Greene in Chicago and Las Vegas on matters involving allegations of fraud and misrepresentation for gaming organizations. Many of his engagements have involved high-profile fraud investigations both nationally and internationally. Welcome, Craig. How are you today?
I'm doing well. And yourself, Shannon?
I'm doing great. Thanks for being here.
Super. I look forward to it.
Well, can you talk to us a little bit about your session at the gaming conference?
Certainly. My session is really going to be a basic overview to kind of acquaint the new internal auditor this whole concept of occupational fraud and how it evolves and works within the gaming industry. That being said, however, others that are attending the conference can certainly benefit from the session as well, as I will be giving some updates on recent fraud cases and risks that have been occurring during the past year since the last conference. Really, what I'm going to start off discussing is some of the recent surveys that are out there on occupational fraud, and this really is to help the participant understand the breadth and nature of these frauds. I'll then discuss the profile of the common occupational fraudster and give really some common sense, I like to think, tips to participants on what to look for. The next topic we'll cover is kind of a brief introduction to talking about fraud risk assessment and within the gaming environment. In other words, what are the areas that typically we see the largest risks in? Then we'll go ahead and cover some of the more recent frauds that have occurred out there in this past year, and really some of the more common ones that you see within the gaming industry. I really know that people love to hear from real-life examples, and that is what I really try to focus on. I really constantly monitor the news both here in Las Vegas and internationally as well for interesting stories of gaming fraud cases.
That sounds great. Can you actually talk about a recent occupational fraud that is affecting the gaming industry?
Certainly. Gaming, as we all know, relies very heavily on technology. It's been that way for quite some time, and it continues to evolve. And really, with the introduction now of iGaming, internet gaming, it's just going to continue to rely upon it, and this will be a risk, certainly, that auditors have to look at. So we should really be concerned about technology risks, both from the standpoint of gaming management and the internal auditors. Recently we had a case down in Australia, and it was really kind of an interesting case in that it involved a high-stakes poker player. And what that individual did was he conspired with an employee within the casino itself in order to hack, if you will, or obtain access to the video surveillance cameras. With this access, he was able to go ahead and start playing the games. And what was happening was they were counseling him on the side as to what the other cards that the players had. Wow. So from a fraud perspective, it's almost an ingenious fraud if you think about it, but he was able to obviously observe the cards of the other players. And as a result, he was able to beat those other players. He ultimately won millions of dollars. Wow. He actually was not a citizen of Australia, but another country, and then he quietly left the country before it was discovered. Even though the casino itself wasn't necessarily the loser, because as we all know, it's the players. The fact is that it's a concern from a reputational risk, and that it has come out in the news media, of course, of this fraud, and the fact that he used an insider, an employee, if you will, to go ahead and perpetrate it. So I just found that to be one of the most fascinating cases that have occurred recently.
Absolutely. Now, can you talk about some of the traditional measures used to prevent fraud?
Yeah, really the traditional methods of fraud prevention within the gaming industry have really relied heavily on the stringent set of internal control standards that exist within casinos. And as we all know, those are commonly referred to as minimum internal control standards, or MICs. And MICs are really something that's started with the regulators themselves, whether state regulators, or in the case of a tribal casino, it would be the National Indian Gaming Commission, for example. And what that does is it requires a common set of procedures, if you will, in handling the gaming revenues and operations. So really, when we're talking about fraud, there's a lot of emphasis on these internal controls. And what they do is they usually require specific procedures for cage operations, revenue auditing function, gaming tables, devices, and the likes. And it also provides for controls that I refer to as really a perception of detection, such as we were just discussing surveillance. When the patron comes in the casino and they see the cameras, there's this perception that if they do something wrong, they're going to get caught on the cameras. Likewise, employees would have that same perception that if they miscount the money or pocket some of the money, they too will be caught. So there's this kind of perception of detection. In addition to that, you've got this whole idea of security, a security function where you've got uniformed and from time to time perhaps plainclothes individuals that are walking on the casino floor, and again, give this idea of a perception of detection. So I guess the whole point is, with all these wonderful controls in place, how possibly could a fraud occur? Well, really my concern has been, and I've talked to people that work at some of the major casinos here in Las Vegas, and really the problem is these back-of-the-house frauds that occur. And these are really more the traditional occupational frauds that you see in any company. And, quite frankly, they aren't often caught by this internal control system because the mix really emphasizes more the casino portion, the gaming part of the business, as opposed to the back-house accounting and personnel and things like that. So often what you find is that gaming operations, and especially smaller ones, can be also subject to really the typical occupational frauds that we see in all these businesses, such as fictitious vendors, corrupt payments to decision makers, various types of payroll frauds, vendor frauds where the vendor's actually overbilling, lapping schemes. For example, if the casino is giving out markers, that could be a fraud that's occurring. And then there's a whole host of frauds that can go on with payroll. So really it's kind of these common frauds that we see in many businesses. And of course, what I find is with the emphasis in the front of the house, often the back of the house is overlooked.
True. Now, with our attendees, if there is one thing that you would want them to take away from your session, what would you want that to be?
Well, really what I'd like the attendees to be, is really awareness of fraud. It's much like what the TSA says. If you see something, say something. But seriously, what I hope the participants will remember is some of the red flags that we discussed, some of those anomalies that we see out there, and so forth, that they might see during their audit, which really could be this red flag or the telltale sign of fraud. Often, unfortunately, frauds are just kind of stumbled upon.
That's true. Well, I want to thank you for your time, Craig. We're looking forward to seeing you at the gaming conference.
Well, thank you as well, Shannon. Thank you.
Don't miss the IIA's 2014 Gaming Conference, the winning strategy for gaming audit professionals. For information on the 2014 Gaming Conference, visit www.theiia.org/go-to/gaming2014.